Hello, everyone. My name is Katerina. Today, I will be sharing with you an analysis of my personal experience with reference. For me, reference was a library service that I seldom used. If I did, it was virtual. Approaching the reference desk in a library, even an academic library, was a daunting task. For me, as for many others, there were such things as stupid questions. For example, during my undergraduate studies, I utilized email as the main means of reference. I truly believed that it was effective enough to meet my information needs. However, after this recent analysis with reference, I have drawn different conclusions. My approach to the reference analysis stemmed from my academic and my professional background. I have studied and done extensive research in the area of history. Although my previous study was in European history, I currently intern for a cultural heritage institution that is dedicated to American history. So I decided to continue down this new path and make my inquiries about topics in U.S. history. My first reference interaction was face-to-face. I broke down this section into two parts. First, I approached the face-to-face reference interview for personal knowledge. I wanted to ask a question that I myself am genuinely curious to learn some answers to. The second part, I enlisted a helper in the form of my 10-year-old sister who was in 6th grade. I wanted to take on the role of a parent who attends the library and uses the library services with and for their child to examine the nuances of the reference interview. I will go against the grain here and begin with the good. My first face-to-face reference interview, I ventured into the unknown alone. I wanted to choose a library in which I never utilized the reference service, but am familiar with its resources. So I chose Park Ridge Public Library as it is my new neighborhood library. My experience began when I spotted the librarian sitting behind the reference desk. She was working on her computer, but frequently glanced up to check on the library patrons sitting on the couches and working at the computers. When I arrived at the counter, she looked up and smiled. I took note of how she stopped her work on the computer to address me. I then asked my question, "Can you help me find information about Chicago-style jazz?" The librarian responded with an enthusiastic yes. She stood up and out from behind the desk and motioned for me to follow her to one of the computers. She inquired about what specific information I needed. I said I would like to focus on significant people, where and how it began, and current events. So she walked me through several of the library's databases dedicated to the subject of history to find out about Chicago history. She also showed me several websites related to Chicago music institutions, as well as a bibliography of works about music. I was pleasantly surprised at the variety of sources that she had gathered for me in a matter of 10 minutes with a few simple questions. For approachability, I was able to easily identify her as the reference librarian. For interest, she was eager to help me get the information I needed, even though it appeared that the topic itself was not of much interest to her. And for listening, she asked me clarifying questions to make sure I received answers to any specificities I may have had. And for follow-up, I was a little disappointed when she did not offer contact information or ask for mine for a follow-up interview on whether or not the information she gave was sufficient. But nevertheless, it was an overall positive experience. Now, let us dive into the bad. This second face-to-face interview, I enlisted the help of my 10-year-old sister who is beginning to learn more about American history. I wanted to gain insight with a new perspective as the parent of a child that is in need of information. So, I myself am a firm believer in second chances, redemption, and the power of library patrons. Since this interview had a negative outcome, I will simply state that I attended a Chicago public library. After this interaction, I voiced my concerns about my experience directly to the library's management so that these issues can hopefully be resolved for future patrons. So, what happened? My sister and I walked in and quickly looked for a general information desk. We asked where the children's section was located. After arriving, we located the reference desk in the children's section. I took note of the librarian or assistant sitting behind the desk. She was feverishly typing away at her computer. When we approached the desk, she did not even glance our way. After nearly a minute, she finally looked at us and stared, asking, "Can I help you?" I was slightly taken aback by her tone. And after a moment, I asked, "Can you help us find information for a 6th grade project about George Washington?" She then stated that we had to look in the nonfiction section, pointed to her left, and went back to her computer. After 5 minutes of trying to find the section, we returned to the desk, only to discover her making a personal phone call at the reference desk. So, with this second experience, I had hoped to have had an even better reference interview as it pertained to the learning of a young child. However, this wasn't the case. So, for approachability, I was able to identify the librarian or assistant, but she appeared to not be available to help as she was working on her computer. For interest, she had shown absolutely no interest in the interview. For searching, no attempt was made, which resulted in no follow-up. As such, I have concluded that certain groups of users are given priority over others, whether or not the librarians are aware of this. Also, there can be instances in which certain libraries may value specific departments and neglect others, and they may place underqualified individuals to run these neglected departments. But on a more positive note, I utilized chat as a reference tool for my final analysis. I chose my own public library, with which I was the most familiar, with its print and electronic sources. And that one is Arlington Heights Memorial Library. Since it was not face-to-face, my anonymity helped with an unbiased reference interview. On the library's website, I located the link for chat reference. And after a few seconds of waiting, a reference librarian entered the chat room. She asked, "How may I help you today?" I followed with my question of, "Can you help me find information about Chicago-style jazz?" She then asked, "What kind of specific information are you looking for?" I said I would like information regarding relevant people and musicians, significant places and events, and institutions around Chicago. She then stated that if I provide my email, she will get back to me with any information she finds. She then asked when I needed the information by, and I gave her a 24-hour deadline. However, I was pleasantly surprised when an hour later she emailed me with a list of helpful websites as well as specific journal articles from the library's databases. On the left here, you can see the content of the email. Although these sources were very useful, I was disappointed that there weren't a variety of sources, such as biographical sources, dictionaries, or even encyclopedias. So I conclude that this is due to the fact that it is very difficult to assess nonverbal cues if a patron requires more information, or even the quickness of face-to-face conversation. However, a helpful aspect of this interaction is that patrons that cannot physically go to the library can still use reference and receive adequate information. Thus, for approachability, it is much more difficult to see if a reference librarian or assistant is available, since it is remote and through a computer. For interest, the reference librarian or assistant seemed interested in helping me find the specific information I needed, not just the general topic, and she produced good but not great results. For listening and inquiring, she did ask clarifying questions. For searching, she appeared to be aware of the library's most popular databases, but she did not utilize a variety of sources or even a bibliography of print sources that the library has available. For follow-up, she did very well in stating in her email that if there are any further questions, to let her know, but she never sent a follow-up email inquiring if the information she provided proved useful for my research. So, what is the verdict? From my reference interview experience and analysis, face-to-face is a definite clear winner. While chat or text can be useful for users that have physical disabilities, are in a remote location, or even located outside of the country, it cannot measure up to a face-to-face reference interview. Nonverbal cues in a reference interview can help the patron decide if the librarian is willing to help, and can also help the librarian know if the patron is satisfied with the results or requires more information. Also, the librarian can take advantage of the teachable moments in face-to-face reference interviews. In this, patrons can quickly learn how to navigate library resources for themselves for future research. Thank you.